We'll go ahead and call the Stationary Source Committee to order. And our first item is a proposed rule amendment to Rule 1106 with Sarah Reese.
Back again?
Yes, hot spot.
Oh.
Start today.
Go right ahead.
Okay, flip it up. Can you put your slides through? Can you put your slides up? Slides. Thank you. Just waiting for the slides to come up. So good morning, I'm Sarah Reese. I'm Assistant Deputy Executive Officer in Planning here at the district, and I'm going to talk about our proposed amended Rule 1106 on marine and pleasure craft coatings. So we proposed 1106 and then the proposed rescinding of 1106.1. So just a little background, the industries that are affected by this and what this rule does is affects manufacturers, distributors, and suppliers of both marine and pleasure craft coatings, but it also impacts the folks who use those coatings, so the shipyards, boatyards, marinas, etc. This rule was last amended in 1995. 1106.1, which applies specifically to pleasure craft, was last amended in 1999. And we did conduct some rulemaking back in October of 2015. We had a public hearing. The rule didn't pass at that time. I'll go into a little bit of the history of that, but we're bringing this back here to, at this point. So in terms of the purpose of the proposed amendments, overarching really to clarify rule requirements. Back when we were doing this rulemaking in 2015 and then also today, we noted that a lot of folks who are subject to these rules weren't really aware of what the requirements are, what they needed to do to comply. So making sure that that language is clear, folks who are covered by it, that they know that they're covered, and then that's all very clear. We also wanted to combine the requirements of 1106, which for marine coatings, and 1106.1, pleasure craft coatings, into one rule because they are similar products and similar types of applications. It makes sense that they would be combined in there. And then also we wanted to add transfer efficiency requirements for application equipment for these coatings. Also, another purpose of this proposed amendment is to make sure that we meet EPA RAC requirements, so make sure the VOC limits are that are applicable are updated, and that they're also similar to requirements in other air pollution control districts. And then there's a couple additional categories that we're adding for new coatings and sealants. And again, we talked about the transfer efficiency requirements. And then finally, just some tweaks to enhance enforceability, again, along the lines of clarification and making clear what needs to be done under these rules. So in our previous rulemaking in 2015, very similar to what we're doing now, just doing these clarifications and then a few other updates. I mentioned that during that time we did observe that there was widespread non-compliance with rule requirements, and so seeing the need to be able to make it more clear to these stakeholders what is required of them. And so we worked very closely with folks in the industry, with interested stakeholders on what the amendments should be. During our public hearing in 2015, concerns at that time were expressed regarding added record keeping and reporting requirements. There weren't any concerns expressed on other parts of the rule. The proposal didn't pass at that time because of the concerns on record keeping and reporting. That's not an issue in the current rulemaking. We've addressed that and taken out those additional requirements. So, basically we're picking up where we left off on that rulemaking in 2015. It was really a matter of, resources and other rules we had going on that we haven't brought it back earlier. So wanted to incorporate those changes. Again, I mentioned that we dropped the label and record keeping and reporting requirements that were causing issues before. For this time around, we've had 2 working group meetings, the most recent of which was earlier this week. We've also had a public workshop. We have concerns that have been raised by one stakeholder or single stakeholder, and those are concerns that have been addressed previously in other rulemakings, so we feel comfortable moving forward here. And I'll go on to kind of the key issues. Both the issues that are being raised, they're specific for energy curable coatings. And so these are coatings that don't air dry. They are coatings that cure by application of light or some other energy source. The first issue raised is a request for an exemption for energy curable coatings that have less than 50 grams per liter VOC content. We have a counterproposal to have an exemption for these if the VOC content is no more than 10 grams per liter. This is consistent with exemptions that we have in other of our area source rulemakings. And then the other point is that for these energy curable coatings, we actually haven't seen them in application for marine or pleasure craft coating applications. We've not seen that in use. We've not seen that at the marinas or the shipyards. So we're not even sure these particular coatings are being used there. But it did seem to make sense to have this 10 gram per liter exemption, as that is consistent with how we've treated this in other rules. And then the second issue, again, particular to the energy curable coatings, this was a request to add an additional test method for compliance purposes. It's ASTM standard D7767-11. This is a specific test method for thin coatings that are energy curable coatings. Our concern with this is that there's no direct method for measuring VOCs from these thin coatings. What this test method does is it measures the components, so the different components of these coatings. But the problem is we don't know how these coatings are applied when they're formulated. So we don't know how they're actually used in the field. And so this test method might not be appropriate in terms of compliance, of figuring out whether these are actually complying with the different VOC content requirements. Again, this is not a new issue. This is something that has been dealt with in other rulemakings. So, for example, Rule 1168 and Rule 1130. And at the time, we have similarly determined that this test method is not appropriate. We have met with staff, our lab staff have met with 3M, which was one of the developers of this test method, and 3M has also confirmed that this method is not appropriate for compliance verification purposes. It's really a method to be able to help manufacturers figure out the relative quantity of the VOCs in the coatings, but not necessarily the absolute quantities as they are field applied. So in terms of our schedule, we are looking at a set hearing in April of this year and then going to our public hearing in May. And with that, I'll answer any questions.
Very good. Do we have any questions from the board members before we take public comment? Do we have any public comment cards, Dr. Liu?
We have a public comment card, Rita Liu.
Rita has used all of her comments on this rule already. No. Please, Rita, go right ahead.
Good morning. Rita Liu, Director of Environmental Affairs for Radtech International. And I'd like to start out by stating a few basic facts. According to the district, if 100% of stationary sources were to shut down, we would still not achieve clean air. NOx and mobile sources, not VOCs on stationary sources, are the problem. And incentives are the way forward to achieve emission reductions. I think we've all heard that at the district. Now let's come to this rule. According to the staff report, there are no emission reductions whatsoever with this Rule 1106 proposal. And therefore, not surprisingly, staff has concluded that no additional reformulations to lower VOC materials are expected. So there's no emission reductions, there's no incentives for reformulation. What there is added language and added red tape. Now I want to give some credit to the staff for working with us on removing some of the more troubling aspects of this rule. And they've really been professional and they really have shown an interest in trying to hash this out, but we still have several concerns. We think this proposal places the wrong emphasis on micromanaging the exemption levels of super compliant materials. And our proposal would be to exempt materials less than 50 grams per liter. We think this is fair because the rule currently allows 730 grams per liter in some categories. So staff points to Rule 1113, but we don't think it's an appropriate comparison since unlike Rule 1113, this rule has limits of 730 grams per liter. Rule 1113 has limits of 50 grams per liter, and even some at 25. So it does make sense there to put the exemption level at 10. Providing the exemption for 50 grams per liter would incentivize voluntary emission reductions above and beyond what were called for in the rule. And once again, we're dealing with the lack of clarity with the test methods. These are materials applied in thicknesses that are fractions of the thickness of a human hair. The communication staff had with 3M, by the way, 3M was not the developer of the method, RadTech was. 3M was one of the participants, and the communication they point to happened 10 years ago. The title of the test method specifically states measure VOCs, not estimate VOCs. It's not perfect, but we're back to the question that we always ask. If not that, then what? Then tell us how you're going to enforce. So we hope that we can resolve some of these issues, and we appreciate your time. Thank you.
Please stay there for a second. Mr. Chair, can I ask her a question? Okay.
Please.
Sarah just told us staff's not aware of any actual application for marine vessels yet. You sent me a research paper that showed that this technology had been used, submarine ballast repair.
Correct.
So it has been used in marine applications.
I wouldn't be here if it wasn't being used in marine applications. Now, whether or not they're docking into the South Coast Basin is
Right.
another question. But then are we going to wait for the Navy ship to dock and then figure out what test method we're going to use on those coatings? We want to be proactive. We want to keep the South Coast as an open area for people to consider bringing these coatings.
So
in.
exemption list limits and test methods.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Does staff have any response to any of that at all, or?
Well,
Thank you, Rita.
we have asked repeatedly to have examples of where these coatings are being used in the types of applications that are covered under our marine and pleasure craft coating rules. We haven't received any examples of that in response. I will say that because they're energy curable, it's going to be a very different type of application than what you typically see at these marinas and shipyards. They're going to have a light source and energy source and be able to use them that way. So it seems unlikely, but again, if we had examples where these products were being used and there was a barrier in our regulation to their use, it would be something that we would take under consideration and figure out a way to address. We have not seen those. Regarding the issue on NOx versus VOC and that this rule, we don't expect to get additional VOC reductions as a result of this rule. That's because these requirements are already in place, either here or at the federal level. Because the rule isn't very clear, we think that there's a lot of folks who haven't been complying. But when we make our estimations of emission reductions, we assume that the rule and all those requirements are actually being met, whether they are in fact or not. So we do think that having these additional requirements that we put in the rules, they're not necessarily additional in terms of emission reductions, but we think they will help assist folks in complying and being able to meet what's already on the books.
Thank you. Board member comments, questions?
Yeah, what about exempting the 50 grams per liter? Talk about that.
Especially where there's a limit of 730.
We've had some discussions about that. It's, for us, a little unclear why it would be, 50 versus any other level. 10 is a level that we have used in several other rules before. But so, and again, if we had examples of where these products are being used, it might be different. I think we are a little concerned about having a blanket exemption of 50 that would be applicable to all products, not just for these energy cured ones.
Right, but if the limit's 730 and we're incentivizing people to go to 50 or less.
It's for certain categories. It's not for
Right,
all
but
these coatings.
can we target the exemption to the categories where the limit is the highest?
I suppose we can. The question is, what are you being exempted from, right? So you're being exempted from some minimal record keeping and reporting requirements, which we have not added to. So one question is, if you're exempt, we don't even know you're operating. We don't know that it is 50 grams per liter or less. So you're just being exempted from a few record keeping requirements. that would allow us to even know whether you're qualified for the exemption. So if you have a 40 gram per liter, you're free to use it. And what are the requirements that are going to be in place? What are you being exempted from? Just a few minimum requirements that allow us to verify.
Well, it seems to make a difference to the industry. An industry that.
One industry.
One industry that has a product that is, emitting at less than 50 grams per liter when everybody else has products at 730. I mean, it's something, to me, again, as we always tell you, when we have solutions like that, we want to incentivize those businesses to be operating within the district as opposed to the other ones that have higher emissions. I continue, it's hard to express the level of frustration year in and year out when we come up against this test method issue. The exemption issue, maybe doesn't come up every time, but the test method issue comes up every time. It gets muddled. My understanding is in the draft rule, Mark, my board consultant, read it, said that there's within the definition, the test method is mentioned, but not in the test method section. So it's unclear whether or not we'll be using any test method to verify if this technology is used, what they're going to be held accountable to, whether there's multiple test methods they have to demonstrate compliance with. All that thing, year in, year out, has come up in several rules now. It's really frustrating. I mean, it's really, really frustrating. I wish we would settle this once and for all and maybe go back and fix the rules we've already adopted so that we have one approach on this, on the test method issue at least, that makes enough sense. And I know you guys aren't comfortable with the test method.
That's not,
but
it's not really the issue. Sorry, Dr. Liu. It's that you cannot use it for compliance purposes.
Right. So if you believe you cannot use it for compliance purposes, how do we, and we have some confidence that in this and in graphic arts and other things, we can get a lot of emission reductions. And I don't agree with Rita. VOC emission reductions are important. You can tell me the same thing because you can't do it by NOx alone for certain places, right? You've got to get both. But in order to get that, in order to incentivize the businesses who are providing us the solutions, I think we have to work with them. We have to figure this out. And we can't put them on the hook to comply with multiple test methods that don't even apply to their technology, or to go and try to work with ATSM and try to come up with their own solutions, yet it doesn't work for you guys. I mean, you guys have to work with them in a way so we can resolve this. I mean, it comes up in rules after rule after rule, and it's quite honestly, it's annoying. I don't understand, if we last adopted this rule in 1995, it's 24 years later, why we can't get any emission reductions. I mean, in the rulemaking process, when we amend a rule, are we required to do a best available retrofit technology assessment, right? Have we done that assessment? Have we gone out? Have we seen if the people who are doing 730 grams per liter can get down to anything lower?
We did that in the 2015 rulemaking, and we haven't seen anything in that interim time.
24 years, we can't do any better.
Well, we took a look at this in 2015 because we did the rulemaking effort then, and we went all the way to public hearing, but we just didn't adopt it at that time.
Yes, I remember. That was quite an interesting hearing. Well, it's surprising to me that we can't get any emission reductions, especially when it appears that there's some technologies out there that could get us quite a bit emission reductions if it could be applied. Obviously, if you're going to UV treat an entire ship, it's different from the small applications they normally do. But repairs obviously would make sense. Anyway, it doesn't make sense to me that we're not getting emission reductions, that we're having the same fight with the UVB LED industry that we have every time. And I just don't know. I mean, board members have consistently expressed the same frustration that I'm expressing. And we end up right back here, if I may, in the same boat.
Because we like this coating, we like this method. The UV method is cleaner than a lot of other kinds of coatings. But you talked about a 50-liter exemption. And that would be industry specific, I think is what you said, or not?
Energy curable specific? No.
No, it
You
wouldn't.
said that it could be categories. There's different types of coatings within this
Categories.
rule. You could, in theory, apply that exemption just to those categories that have, or close
They're
to
using
like
this kind of
700.
methodology.
I will say it is a challenging category. These are
Yeah.
tough environments, so unlike the technology advancements that have occurred for architectural coatings, like there's not a lot of money that goes into this, but these are specialized coatings for the most part. You know, we could do some additional tech assessments and technology development. If we, you know, even, it would be very difficult, we think, to have a BARC determination for the energy curable because of the cost. It is a significantly higher cost. It's not that we don't want to incentivize it, but I'm not sure it would come out in a BARC assessment that would be the sole way to comply with some lower limits because of the added costs. But we're open to ideas on the exemption level. It wouldn't just be energy curable, it would probably apply to any coating that could meet a lower limit.
No, I'm not, you know, I don't want to dictate the technology, I want to get the emission reductions.
It just seems like what you're exempt, in this rule in particular, what you're exempting people from is not enough to drive people to.
Seems to matter to them.
Well,
Well, I just think, you know, if anything could be done, it would be to go down this exemption route and have it very narrowly crafted to fit this category that we're dealing with. So that would be my recommendation.
And maybe a longer term plan to figure out what to do about the test method issue. I mean, it just, I know it's, I've always looked at it as a, you know, round peg, square hole issue. But we have to figure this out because we all know that the technology can get us emission reduction. So let's figure out how to work with them as opposed to against them and embrace it, whether it's through some joint technology development process or joint test method development process or however we have to do it. You know, I think we should be welcoming businesses like this with open arms.
So we did that in the last 1168 rulemaking as part of board direction. We created this method flow chart that had all the different compliance methods and what you would use for every different type of coating. And obviously when you get down to the bottom of the flow chart on this one, on compliance, there's nothing, and it says we need to work on a better method to be able to do compliance.
And I think part of it is it's because these are thin film coatings, and so the other methods that they have, you're able to, with a thicker film, you're able to actually measure, right, very good. But with these guys, it's you're measuring like in the detection limits, so you can't get that at it that way. I think if we knew that there was a need, a demand for these coatings in this particular industry, we would certainly work to try to figure out some test method. It's a lot of resources for us to do that.
But the test method issue comes up under 1168, 1130, 1113.
It'd be broadly applicable.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not an easy method to come up with.
Right.
It's very difficult to develop, and for whatever it's worth, in none of those categories, we tread it very carefully compliance-wise, and I don't think a ticket has been issued ever.
As it shouldn't be if we don't have any way to tell them if they're right or wrong.
So it's not really a current barrier unless they're really concerned about compliance uncertainty, but we could work on that.
The potential liability, I'm sure.
Yes.
So Dr. Mayor Mitchell, you've raised a lot of concerns. I think some of these concerns staff has heard before. You know, in this particular aspect, we're looking at going to set hearing. I would say let's continue along that route, but in the next few weeks, we'll always have the opportunity to pull it. But let me sit down with our team and see what we can do with regards to some of the compliance aspects of it. I mean, obviously, that's going to be a very important component for a whole lot of reasons, as we all know. So I would suggest that we do that.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah, we've been making the same argument for many years.
11 for me,
And-
probably 10 for you,
Yeah,
right?
because we think that this, these kinds of coatings are really good, and the Rods wanted to encourage them. We don't want to discourage, you know, the development of these and the use of these. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Do my colleagues in the remote locations have any other comments they want to add?
No comments here. I mean,
No,
I
we
was
did-
public
We
comment.
did public comment already.
No, I'm asking if my board colleagues at the remote
Like that.
locations want to add on. I know you guys have had a chance, but
I
I
think
just
we
want to add
vented
on.
sufficiently here in
that-
CCA.
Yes, and I want to applaud both of your guys' comments, and I want staff to know I completely agree that we need to find some solutions so we're not hearing the same thing. And Dr. Liu, like you said, 11 years, I've heard it all my tenure here. It's something we need to get done. So I would really encourage staff to find a path, because it's discouraging to hear over and over again that we're not, and yes, it's just a little bit of record keeping and bookkeeping, but if we can show a product is this much better than everything else, then why are we even putting that kind of a requirement on a business? And to hear that come out of Dr. Liu's mouth, wow. So I'm right in line with both of you, so thank you. All right, any other comments on this one? If not, we'll move on to the next item, the update on AB 617. Joe K. Gosh.
Great. Good morning. So I'm here to provide an update on the community plans implementation portion of AB 617. And just as an overview of the sorts of activities that we've been doing for the community plan implementation, in last year, we focused on doing the community outreach that was necessary for the community selection. So again, identifying which communities would be considered for AB 617, and then putting forth the recommendations for our year one communities, which were 3 of which were then approved by the Air Resources Board. Starting actually at the end of 2018, but certainly continuing on full blast in 2019, we formed the community steering committees and are meeting on a monthly basis for each of the 3 communities. I'll talk a little bit more about the progress we've made in those meetings so far. And the focus of this year is really the development of both the air monitoring plans and emission reduction plans, again, for each of the 3 communities. And then next year we'll begin plan implementation. Some of the key milestones that we've hit, again, last year, CARB set the statewide strategy and then designated the year one communities, of which 3 are within our district. We have a deadline in July of this year to begin the air monitoring, and then a deadline in September for our governing board to adopt the emission reduction plans. Okay. So these are the 3 communities that were approved by CARB for year one implementation. That's Wilmington, Carson, and West Long Beach. Our inland community of San Bernardino and Muscoy, and then the East LA communities of Boyle Heights, the unincorporated East LA, and West Commerce. So late last year, we formed the community steering committee, so one committee for each community. And the purpose of these community steering committees was to help us identify and prioritize that community's specific local air pollution concerns and issues. These committees are helping to guide the specific strategies that we are writing into the community plans. And you can take a look at the list of the types of folks who are represented on these communities, on these committees. They are all majority resident. We also have representation from local business owners or workers or labor unions. We have a number of local community organizations that are represented there. A number of local agencies, and I particularly wanted to highlight that we have really good participation from many land use agencies. In fact, we have land use agencies participating in all 3 of our committees, and so this is a really exciting new partnership as part of this program. And we have other types of folks represented as well. Okay. This is roughly our steering committee timeline. We started out by asking the committees and the members of the public attending our meetings to help us identify the community air quality concerns. We shared with them our technical data, what information we have in terms of air pollution sources, but we definitely wanted to hear about the community's specific concerns. Then last month, we went through a prioritization process. Again, starting to look at the very long list of air quality issues that were identified and identifying which categories of those issues they wanted to focus on as part of the AB 617 program. This was going to help us identify what would be our target areas or pollutants for the air monitoring, and also some target sources or places that we would focus our emission or exposure reduction efforts. And then moving forward in the next several months, we will be writing these plans and developing the specific measures that we need to write into these plans, and also what metrics we're going to be using for tracking progress. I want to give you a flavor of what these meetings are like. In general, we try to have them in a very interactive format. The photo at the top left shows one of our small group discussion activities with our committee members. This was during the prioritization process last month. You can see there's a board.
East Los Angeles, because that's Father John.
That's correct. Very good. So we had the cards with the air quality concerns, and we're sorting out the cards in terms of priority. The graphic on the top right is an example of one of our social media graphics. You'll notice it's English and Spanish integrated into one posting. We try to provide all our materials in English and Spanish, and actually have gotten compliments on that. We're also using co-hosts in two of the three communities, and also using an outside third-party facilitator in two of our three communities, again, to help facilitate that discussion and to make sure that we are, we are kind of conducting our meetings in a timely fashion. We make sure we always have Spanish language interpretation. In some cases, we have also had additional languages as well. And we've also had some requests from folks from our steering committee to have a place where they can leave some of their materials, like a community affairs table. So we've implemented that as well. So this is just a quick summary of the numbers of what progress we've made to date. So just to give you a sense of the scale, we have about 140 steering committee members and alternates, which is a lot of people. So far, we've had, the slide says 12, but as of last night, that we can make that number 13 community meetings. Very good participation at every one of our meetings so far. We have 23 now additional meetings scheduled in 2019, specifically for the steering committees. We have additional meetings scheduled for community selection for year 2. These three communities identified over 200 air quality concerns. So clearly that was one of the reasons why we needed to go through a prioritization process to see what we wanted to focus on. I wanted to share some positive feedback that we've gotten from our steering committee members and also some members of the public. We had a really nice compliment about using a co-host to lead the meeting. And so we got a huge congrats to SCAQMD for asking this community member to help lead our meetings. We got compliments on our meeting materials, and then making sure that all our materials are available in Spanish, and also some compliments about just realizing why it's important to have all these different folks at the table. Another area that we have, I would say, made really shown some leadership in is providing a lot of the air quality data in digital format, in accessible and interactive maps online. We are using, with the support of Ron's team, we are using the Esri Story Maps platform to share a lot of this data, to be able to walk the reader through all the different types of data that we have. This includes land use data, where schools are located, where air pollution sources are located. The map on the right side actually shows all the air pollution concerns that were identified by this community, as well as the community boundaries that were shown.
Can we overlay the permitted facilities on that? The fine database sort of?
Yes, so basically we can layer in all that information that we have for some of these maps. Last month, we went through the prioritization process for each of the three communities. So I did want to share with you what was the outcome of those prioritizations. So in the Wilmington, Carson, and West Long Beach community, the highest priority issues identified were refineries, ports, and neighborhood truck traffic. There were specific issues within each of these that were identified. And then I would say the kind of next level of priority categories included oil drilling and production, rail emissions, and schools. Schools not as an air pollution source, of course, but as a sensitive receptor. In San Bernardino and Muscoy, the highest priority issues really focused on trucks. And the top three were the neighborhood truck traffic, particularly warehouse-related truck traffic. They identified the BNSF rail yard, which of course, is very prominently located in the middle of that community. But a lot of the concerns around the rail yard were actually about the truck emissions. And then, of course, the concerns around warehousing and new facilities. Additional issues that were identified included the Omnitrans facility that is in San Bernardino, as well as a couple cement facilities in that area. Okay. For East LA, Boyle Heights, and West Commerce, again, another story of trucks. We have the truck traffic and also traffic on the freeways and intersections. Some specific idling concerns. Also some concerns around the warehouse distribution centers. In this community, there were concerns about the rail yard emissions, not so much focused on trucks, but focused on just overall rail yard emissions as a whole. This community also identified schools, parks, and community centers as a potential exposure reduction target, and some concerns around some metal processing facilities and some toxic waste facilities. Okay. So I did want to kind of review some of the issues that were raised and how we've been able to address them. Early on, when we were forming these committees, we had a lot of questions about the membership criteria. We did provide a membership process document and really tried to keep the focus true to the spirit of AB 617, which was a focus on local entities. Again, toward the beginning of this process, we had questions about the purpose and the authority, about whether these committees had approval authority. We clarified this by providing a charter for each of our communities, and we asked the members to sign the charter. And again, emphasizing what role the steering committees will play and how their input is really critical. We had some concerns around potential conflicts of interest and some concerns around disclosures. And what we've done is just ask people to provide biographies. We've consulted with our legal team. This is not something that we can legally require of anyone, but we certainly try to encourage that transparency. We had some controversies around the community boundaries in the three communities, and really this was just a matter of having those discussions, and both on a committee level and also individual concerns about specific areas of the boundaries. We made some adjustments. We reached agreement. All the boundaries are final. We did have some feedback on showing technical data and making that accessible, and we felt that the best forum was to form a technical advisory group that meets separately on an approximately quarterly basis, and that is an area where we can dive into the technical details about the air monitoring, about the emissions inventory, and the modeling. And there are 3 representatives from each of the steering committees that serve on the technical advisory group. And finally, we had a request to really make sure we engage young people. So we are actually live streaming all of our community meetings on Facebook Live and make sure we advertise on social media. So that's had a really, really positive reception. I also wanted to add one thing on here. There's a lot of concern about the tight timelines, and so a concern on our side and also concern from the community side. So I definitely want to reiterate that this is definitely a challenge, and we've had many requests for us to get materials out in a more timely manner, but when you're moving at a breakneck pace, it's tough. We discussed with each of our committees some of these potential strategies, and actually starting in this month's meetings, we are actually discussing some potential measures or ideas for both the air monitoring and the emission reduction plans. But you can see we are really, very open to the different types of strategies to be written into these plans. This includes regulatory strategies, incentives, an enforcement plan, which is a required part of the emission reduction plan, different types of outreach, both to the members of the public or members in our business community, and also different types of interagency collaboration. So particularly collaboration with our partners at the Air Resources Board with regard to their mobile source authority, and also collaborations with the land use agencies and public health agencies to have complementary programs. So next steps, again, this month and next month, we are seeking that input on the specific measures for our emission reduction plan and the air monitoring plan. The draft plans, so for the draft emission reduction plan, we're actually aiming for May. The air monitoring plan actually needs to be submitted to the Air Resources Board in May. So that one has an earlier timeline, and we are still aiming for a board hearing in September for the emissions reduction plan. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Maybe note the committee hearing.
Oh, that's right. So on Monday, Phil, Wayne, and I will be attending the Assembly Natural Resources Committee hearing to provide an update on AB 617 and how that implementation is going, and we'll be joined by one committee member from each of our 3 communities as well.
I have a question.
Please, go ahead, Supervisor.
Hi, good morning. Yeah, I mean, I'm obviously very enthusiastic about these community meetings, and I understand our staff is very enthusiastic about these as well. So being new to this, I was curious on the membership as it related to, I know there's a good showing of community members. There was a slide that mentioned elected officials. I'm assuming elected officials representatives are on this, but I can't really find the good membership list. So was wondering if we could be provided at least with, and is the steering committee membership different than who shows up? Or what? And then the other thing was the summary. I understand there's a summary online for the January meeting, but there's no summary for the February meeting. And then I think there was a meeting last night. So how quickly are we getting up these summaries, not the archived videos, but how can how can we all and the public see, what's going on sort of in real time?
Sure.
Those are my 2 questions.
Great. So we can definitely share the rosters with you. All the rosters are posted on our website, so you can actually find them there. But we're happy to send the specific links as well. As far as the meeting summaries go, we try to get them out as quickly as possible. Generally, try to get them out prior to the next meeting, but again, kind of working under some tight timelines here.
Supervisor, this is Phil.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that helps even for the next meeting, I would think, to see the summary from the meeting previously online in case, somebody wanted to show up and comment about what happened at the last meeting. But I think that I would really urge you to get those up. The fact that the February one isn't up yet is, I think that speaks to our transparency.
Sure. And I think again, the meeting summaries is something that we need to work on. What we do try to do is at least post a link to the Facebook Live, so if somebody missed the meeting, they can at least view it through that link.
How long are the meetings generally?
About 2 hours to 2 hours and 15.
Okay, honestly, who's going to do that? I think the summary is what we need to provide for the public and for any elected officials who might be interested, metro directors who might be interested in what's happening in terms of some of these issues. Honestly, no one's going to go on Facebook for 2 hours and try to get a sense of what went on in the meetings. I'm just saying.
Sure. And as far as your clarification question about the elected officials, we actually do have one elected official who's serving on our East LA, Boyle Heights and West Commerce committee. And then we have elected official staff who are serving on that committee, as well as our San Bernardino and Muscoy committee.
Right. But in terms of the Carson, Wilmington, East Long Beach, there's no representatives from any of the elected officials in that area? Is Joe,
That's right. So basically for that particular committee, we had, I believe, over 100 people who submitted interest forms, including a lot of residents who really wanted to participate directly. And so our feeling was that, clearly this community included a lot of people who wanted to participate directly. So we actually asked the elected officials to kind of allow them to have a chance to participate in these committees directly.
and these are open to the public?
Absolutely. So all our meetings are open to the public. We have, so you saw the photo of the prioritization activity. The public also participates in those small group activities as well. We always, make sure we have time for public comment. And, again, we make sure that, the members of the public are able to engage and participate and provide input at all of these meetings.
And what about labor? Who shows up from organized labor?
So we have labor union representatives at both the East LA one, so that's the SEIU 721, and then the ports area. Don't remember the specific, but we do have the labor union. I believe it's the one representing the refinery workers. Is what I believe.
LIUNA.
Oh.
LIUNA, Laborers Union. Was it?
Laborers.
I'm not sure.
Okay.
I'm asking. I don't know.
Right. I'll have to check on that. So yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Good questions. Any other questions from my colleagues?
I have one, Chairman. On the
Sure.
technical advisory group that you mentioned, is there one group or does each 617 community have their own technical advisory group?
So that is actually one advisory group with participation from all three.
All three, okay, yeah. Okay. How large are the steering committees in general?
About 30 to 35 people.
Okay,
That's it?
that's it.
And do we have any other public comments on this, or?
I've got questions or comments, of course. I don't see any public comment cards. No, we don't have any public
Okay.
comment cards. I assume the meeting last night went okay?
One is coming.
Oh, we do have one. Susan, okay.
Go ahead with
Get
your
through my
questions,
stuff.
Dr.
Let me
Lou.
get through my stuff, Susan, and we'll have you. But last night went okay?
I'm here.
You're here? You are? Yeah, I know. You got the job, you figured, oh, I'll do a MATES study every 7 years or so. I might fund some cool research, and now look what you're doing, huh? Anyway, I do have to say that the feedback I've been getting from people has actually also been, not 100%, but relatively positive. And these are from community members and groups who spend their entire life criticizing us about everything. So I think having even any positive feedback is good. One of the big picture things that I've gotten from this is that there's been a really steep learning curve that we have improved, and we're getting better at this every time, every meeting, every time we're getting deeper into the 617 process, we're getting better at it. So I think that's very encouraging. How's the hiring going for staff on this project?
So we do have 2 new staff joining our team this month, and I believe 1 additional person coming, hopefully coming next month. So it's
Do we still have
ramping up.
vacancies we're trying to
And we
fill?
have additional vacancies beyond that.
So it's still a challenge to do
If I can
that.
add, between the January and December budget requests, we added 83 positions for
Yes,
AB
I thought it was
617.
86, but 83,
And
okay.
so Joe Kay is reporting for her division, but we have people throughout the agency that we are hiring and in the process. I don't have the specifics, but I think we've done a pretty good job getting the initial ones in, and we're still working on some of the last
Right,
last
because
group
how
coming in.
well we can do is gonna be dependent on
Exactly.
whether or not we can get people in those positions.
And a lot of people internally want to work on this program because it's such a high visibility, important program. So we've had a lot of people transferring around as well, so.
That only makes for more problems for you, but that's.
Exactly, it's just kind of like, you know,
So-
different holes to plug.
If I could just add, so in Joe Kay's defense, we've gone this far with pretty much a skeleton crew on getting these meetings going. Although at the meetings, we have great representation
there's a
from
lot
all
of staff.
divisions.
Yeah.
Again, we're just starting to fill out the group, so I think we'll be doing a lot better on getting the summaries out in time and in the future. But it's
Yeah, it
really
was
been a
related
small
to Supervisor
team,
Hunt's.
like, working crazy hours to
Yes.
come this far.
I appreciate that, and I think your staff deserves, all the staff who are working on this deserve congratulations for all the effort that's going on in that. At the Environmental Justice Advisory Group meeting, maybe 4, 5, 6 months ago, when we talked about this item, Dr. Jill Johnston from USC said, you know, a lot of these members on these advisory committees, community advisory committees, are not going to really know air quality issues, and she recommended development of a good air quality 101, you know, guidebooks, YouTube videos, whatever, you know, infographics, whatever we could do. And I don't see that anywhere among any of our staff. I think it'd be helpful just generally for our communications staff to have that kind of material. And I thought it was an excellent recommendation from Dr. Johnson, and I would encourage staff to really, I mean, not only just for the 617, but just generally that we should have some air quality 101 stuff that can explain things in simple terms for people who are interested in learning about it. Obviously, they kind of jumped in to, with both feet, everybody on the community advisory groups, and they're probably getting to know everything pretty quickly. The other thing I've always been concerned about is whether everyone who's participating has a common understanding of what success looks like on the back end. Because I can foresee getting to the end of this and a lot of people saying, oh, wow, that's great. We're, you know, put a bow on it. You know, that's success. And other people saying, that's not what I expected at all. So I would encourage you to start talking about what our anticipation is of what comes out of this process. You know, what are these communities going to look like? What's going to happen? I mean, we adopt the emission reduction plans and then what? But there needs to be a sort of a common agreement and a willingness to say, okay, we're going to get this much done. You know, there may be things that will still remain unaccomplished because of the limitations of our authority and other things, but we should have common expectations, or else there might be frustration at the back end of this. So working on a common definition of success and a common expectations, I think, would be helpful. And then finally, when you bring the emission reduction plans to the board for adoption, I think it would be really nice to have representatives from the different community advisory committees to send, to come and present what they like or don't like about those emission reduction plans directly to the governing board, not filtered through staff. They're putting so much work and effort into it, and I bet we're just paying them with a few dinners, right? Probably Subway sandwiches or something. I would like to hear directly from them, and I think it would be a good opportunity for them to sort of culminate their participation in that development of that part of this, an important part of this, to come talk to us at the governing board meeting. And we're on a treadmill here. We're going to have more communities being added at some point. ARB allows us, and the legislature funds us to do it. I expect that you're also thinking of what this is going to look like in the future and how you incorporate more communities and more work into the huge workload you're already undertaking on this. That planning's taking place, I assume.
Urban. Mr. Chair, I have something to say.
Please, Supervisor.
I just want to say I totally agree with your comments, and I will just say though, on with respect, my communities of Wilmington and San Pedro are very versed in air quality issues. They probably are teaching us a lot. They have lived and, no pun intended, breathed air quality issues their entire life. And I would venture to say the community of Wilmington has probably had more to do with what's happening at our ports than almost any other community. And San Pedro has sued and won against the Port of Los Angeles for expansions of terminals because of the inability to reduce air emissions with operations at the port. So, and
With Coalition for Clean Air being a co-plaintiff in many of those suits.
Yes, correct. And I am and I agree with you. They will be extremely frustrated if they go through this process and what, like, kind of what happens. So I think we need to really make sure that we have an end game, and I'm assuming that we all agree that we actually do want to implement these community plans and work towards, reduction of emissions. I am curious about the next round. Would it be year 2? Is that how this works? Year 2 communities?
Yes.
This is year 1 communities? And how do we pick the year 2 communities? I have some nominations.
Sure. So we just recently started off our outreach for year 2. We're trying to build upon the work that we did in year 1 in terms of doing the technical data evaluations. On the basis of some of the input that we received in that first round of outreach that we did. We had our first meeting co-hosted with the Air Resources Board and the Leadership Council for Justice and Accountability. That was in North Shore in late February. So that was our first meeting. I know we are working with ARB staff now to schedule a second meeting in LA County for that. And then our public affairs staff are also working to schedule additional meetings throughout our district as well. So, we are, as you mentioned, we are accepting recommendations. We have kind of specific, maybe some specific things.
Paramount.
Okay. Duly noted. There's some specific aspects in terms of some of the things that we learned in this year 1 process that we think would be helpful in terms of making sure that we have communities who obviously, there are a lot of communities who could benefit from this program, but we want to make sure that there are communities who are ready for this program, because it's not just a lot of work on our part, it's a lot of work on the community's end as well. So.
Thank you. Yeah, I wouldn't want to nominate a community that wasn't ready to do the work, but I just wanted to put the Paramount in the mix. So I think they would benefit from this.
If I could add, a lot of what we're going to be able to do in years 2, 3, and beyond depends a lot on the funding. We got 10.8 million initially. We got 20 million for the year 1, which is not enough. We've already spent 13 million on the first installment where we got less than 11. So that's eating into the 20, and we ate most of that up already. We have a commitment from the legislature to have 20 million at least for year 2. But we do not have a continuous appropriation, and we do not have enough. So
which is why you should nominate Paramount, because Speaker Rendon lives in Paramount.
And you'll be in Sacramento on Monday, so
be in Sacramento
keep
on
that in
Monday
mind.
and at other meetings too. So we'll have to do what we can with the resources that are allotted for us. But we want to do more.
We do have one public comment card, Mr. Chair, if I may.
Sure.
Susan Stark, who has apparently worked out her identification, for the moment, marathon. Any crisis is over for now.
Okay, Susan Stark with Marathon Petroleum, and I would echo much of what's been said this morning. I think there's been very good community involvement by residents and other stakeholders. And I think there's been great support by staff. I think there were 24 or more there last night at the Wilmington Carson, West Long Beach meeting. We have a major facility in that community, so we actually have a member on the steering committee, and I'm an alternate, and I participate in the public section. They do the work tables and breakout sessions for the actual steering committee members, but they also take input from the public. And in the group that I was in last night, one of the things, everyone is feeling the urgency of the timing, and there are a lot of decisions having to be made and requests for prioritization on, which issues to tackle. And one of the things we don't have yet is the source apportionment of the risk. So when we were asked to say, okay, what's more important, ocean-going vessels or replacing tank seals? There's not that comparison of the risk that's involved. And so we would just urge, I know it was mentioned at the meeting last night that would be coming sometime this spring, I'm assuming very soon, but as soon as possible, not only to the steering committees, but to the technical advisory group, because otherwise we're kind of making recommendations in a bit of a vacuum. Yeah, it sounds good to, have additional flaring amendments or do this for the trucks. What has been presented is overall MATES 4 data for the community that says, 86% of the risk is from diesel PM. I think it was 4% from benzene, 4% from hexchrome. Don't hold me to it, I'm probably making those up. But again, being able to slot some of the ERP or SERP or whatever the acronym is for emission reduction plans, the more they can be tied to, the cancer risk, and making sure at the end when we tie a bow on it, that we're working on things that make a difference on that overall risk to the communities. So, thank you.
All right, very good. Any other comments from my board members? All right, thank you, staff. And with that, we have our written reports that are attached. Any questions or from any of my colleagues? All right. Okay, any other business by any of my board members? Do we have any general public comment, Dr. Liu?
No.
All right, none here. And if that, we'll go on to the adjournment. Our next meeting will be April 19th. Everyone have a great day and a great weekend.